Hello students, I am going to start an online class for you. The topic of this class, land revenue measures and peasant uprisings in 19th century Assam. This is for the sixth semester honors and regular students of CBCS course. Peasant uprisings were an important incident of the history of 19th century Assam, where the peasants of different parts of Assam protested against the British policy of land revenue, where the British had increased the land revenue of Assam. The people protested against the British policy, and they were so angry, even they had killed the British officials, and also many peasants lost their lives on their protest against the British policy of land revenue. Let's start the class. The establishment of the British rule in India had changed the socio-economic and political condition of the country and had taken a new turn. The British began to run the administration of the country in order to suit their colonial motives. One important impact of the British rule on rural India was the changes in the agrarian structure of the country. Since the grant of Diwani of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa in 1765, the major concern of the British East India Company's administration was to collect maximum revenue as possible. In the late 18th and the early 19th century, the revenue reforms of the company's government had fundamentally affected and altered the Indian rural society. During this period, the demand for high revenue and imposition of new tax had so severely affected the entire rural population that all sections of the peasantry in different parts of the country expressed their voices against the unjust policies of the British. It is found that in the first Jamindar areas, the peasants were left to the tender mercies of the Jamindars, who compelled the peasants to pay the illegal dues and performed beggars. In the riotary areas, the government itself levied heavy land revenue, compelling them to borrow money from the money lenders. It is also observed that over large areas, the lands, the crops, and cattle of the peasants passed into the hands of the money lenders, landlords, and rich peasants. All these have created dissatisfaction among the peasants of different parts of India. Some major peasant uprisings which rocked the country were as such the Indigo Revolt of 1859 to 60 in Bengal, Revolt of Pune and Ahmednagar districts of Maharashtra, Motila outbreak in Malabar, Ramosi peasant forts in Maharashtra in 1879, and the Kuka revolt in Punjab. Now come to Assam. In Assam also, a series of agrarian uprisings were launched by the peasants to redress their grievances. By the time, the Indian people in different parts of the country rose in revolt against the British and forbade the loss of their territories. But the people of Assam and their neighbors had fought a series of battles since 1826 in the protected war of resistance against the same allied power. Though they failed to organize an open insurrection in 1857, which found its expression through the martyrdom that inspired them to carry on the struggle for decades to come, thus, a series of agrarian outbreaks marks the later half of the 19th century Assam, and the peasants expressed their dissatisfaction through rice mills or the people assembly. So people gathered under the mills or the assembly, and that was called the rice mill. And one important aspect of these agrarian uprisings in Assam, that there was no communal barrier because both the Hindus and the Muslims united under the Gusais, the Dolots, and the village headmen of their respective areas to protest against the unjustified revenue assessment of the British government. This peasants' movement had a great contribution towards the growth of national consciousness in Assam in the 19th century. Now come to the revenue assessment of the British. The British rule brought a significant change to the medieval Assam society. When the British took over the charge of the province, it was in a largely depopulated and impoverished. Income derived in Assam was not enough to meet the administrative expenditure. The financial difficulties forced the British government to impose different agricultural taxes, which were very much oppressive for the peasants. Now the classification of lands, how the British classified the lands. Lands were classified into three categories: Bosti, Rupit, and Firingot. The Rupit lands in Kamrup district in 1835 were assessed at 1 rupee per pura, the Bautoli at 12 anaj, and Firingoti at 4 anaj. These rates differed slightly in different other districts and were gradually raised. Now come to the British policies of taxation. So how they have taxed on the people. The peasants of Assam, irrespective of class, caste, and creed, realized the exploitation of the British colonial rule. The poor peasants demanded the reduction of land revenue and imposition of new taxes. Another important factors which brought grievances to the people was the transfer of power from the British East India Company to the town. In order to fulfill the huge deficit caused by the revolt of 1857, the Britishers searched for new source of revenue. So the government imposed some new taxes. In 1858, stamp duties were introduced. In 1860, income tax was imposed, which were totally unfamiliar to the people of Assam. Excise duties were levied at the southern stations of Kamrup, Dorong, and Nagaon. Washing of gold was also framed out, and right to the fees in the rivers bills was offered to the highest bidder. Cutting of timber and reeds and use of grazing fields were also made taxable. Then come to the uprisings of different parts of Assam. Let's start with the rebellion of the Jaintia Hills that was started in 1860, when a house tax and a stamp duty were imposed in 1860 on the people of the region, who till then were not accustomed of paying any kind of money tax, because the hill people, they were not accustomed to any money tax. There rose in open rebellion in its very early stage. The rising was suppressed with an iron hand, for which it could not attract the wide attention. But that not ended the trouble of the Khasi people of the region, and who rose in action once again. Why? It was the license tax that was introduced shortly afterwards on some of their tribal customs and uses, like the use of ceremonial weapons, because in any ceremonies they wear their ceremonial weapons. In their tribal dances were interfered with by the government. All the Khasis soon organized themselves under their respective chiefs, and together they rose in revolt against the British. Though their weapons consisted of bows and arrows only, their suppression was not easy, and it was till the end of 1863 that they could be finally suppressed. That rebellion that was suppressed by the British. Now come to the most important rising of some locally during this period. It was known as the Patowary Uprising. So it was against the British policy of opium, because in those days, while opium was widely circulated in Assam, all sections of the people, they used opium, and British also imposed taxes on opium during this period. Let's start the Patowary Uprising. The opium policy of the British government became very miserable for the people of Nagaon district, which occupied the highest position in poppy cultivation in Assam. In the meantime, a rumor was spread that soon government imposed tax on cultivation of tamul, arecanna nut, and pan, betel pine, because tamul is a very important part of the Assamese culture. So it would also be made taxable. The peasants of Patowary, mostly Lalu, about 12 kilometers away from Nagaon town, led a revolt in 1861. About 15,000 people marched to the southern port of Nagaon to protest against the ban on poppy cultivation and contemplated imposition of tax on tamul and pan. But Lieutenant Herbert Spons refused to hear their complaints. Then the dissatisfied peasants held under the rice mills for 5 days from October 15 to discuss about their future plan to redress their grievances. The number of the people attending the rice mill, because rice mill was the institution under which banner the people raised their protest, increased day by day. The police force tried to break up the gatherings but failed. On 18 October, Lieutenant Singer, the Assistant Commissioner of Nagaon, arrived at Patowary with the force. The people said that if he would respond their demand, then they were now ready to give complaints to the higher authorities. Then the people became so furious, and the commissioner also, then he ordered to seize their bamboo lathis. And the angry mob immediately beaten the officer, beaten to death, and his body was thrown into the river of Kolong. An armed force arrived in the disturbed areas and began to fire to the gatherings. Several persons lost their lives and many were injured. This incident, this spontaneous uprising, is known in the history of Assam as the Patowary Thoa, or the Battle of Patowary. Now come to the next important uprisings. It was known as the Assam riots, that was during 1893-94, and it was in the different parts of Assam, or the different districts actually, of like Dorong, Kampru, Nagaon, and they protested against the British state of the land revenue, and it was through the rice mills actually, the People's Assembly, the people gathered and raised their protest. In Rongia, in Sorukhetri, this type of protest, it was started, and the most important protest, it was in the Pothorughat. Pothorupat Peasant Uprising. It was in the Mongondo subdivision. And that was on 18 January 1894. It was again through the rice mills, the people protested against the increased rate of land revenue and adopted a no tax campaign. In that circumstances, J.D. Anderson, the deputy commissioner of Dorong, arrived with a military force under Lieutenant Barrington. About 2,000 riots gathered in front of the camp of Anderson and protested against the increased rate of land revenue. The angry mob began to throw sticks and cloths of earth to Anderson. Then Barrington ordered an open fire. At last, and as a result, 15 persons injured, and that was according to government report. But according to non-government report, 140 persons lost their lives and 150 injured. This Pothorupat tragedy was regarded as the Jallianwala Bagh massacre of Assam. Then the government itself realized, though lately, that the rate of enhancement of revenue was exorbitant, which was reduced to, initially it was 53% and later 32.7%. And this incidence of the uprisings, so even if those become so famous, even the contemporary praise gave a very good progress of the Assam riots. According to Amrit Bazar Patrika, quote, in Deccan, the fury riots was directed against the moneylenders. In Bengal, against the indigo planters in 1866. In Pabna, against Jamindars in 1872. But in Assam, at this moment, it is open rebellion against the government. So these are some of the important uprisings of some peasants' uprisings of Assam. It was during 19th century that had taken the attraction of the British government and also the media of that time. Now, we see that the peasant uprisings, those were the reflection of the peasant discontentment in Assam. It is also so the nature and objectives of the British rule in Assam. They stood against the exploitation and extortion of the British government. So these were the common peasants only. So earlier British resistance of the Assamese people against the British, it was from the elite class, but the important aspect of this uprising, it was the common people, the peasants, they raised their voices against the British. The contemporary British administrators regarded this move as the evil result of the rice mills, but it was not true. Through these rice mills, they expressed their miserable economic condition under the British rule. The rice mills became their platform through which they could express their grievances. There are certain features of the uprising in the 19th century, like the peasant movements in the other parts of India. In Assam also, the peasants emerged as the main force in the agrarian movements. They were bounded by some particular objectives and redressal to some particular grievances. Their object did not deal with the end of colonialism, exploitation, and subordination. That ends my topic. Thank you.